good evening. I would like to start by crediting Provincial Archives of Alberta, where I researched the archival photos for my presentation tonight. And this photo of photographer Gladys Reeves was taken around 1915, likely by Ernest Brown. Gladys was born in 1890 in England and moved with her family to Edmonton in 1904. And she was 15 when she began work as a photography assistant for Ernest Brown. This is Ernest and Gladys getting cozy here. Ernest, who was 13 years older, was married to Mary Carr and had 2 children with her. Gladys never married, but she and Ernest not only had a lifelong business partnership, but also a lifelong love affair. And if you're interested, you can read their love letters at the Provincial Archives of Alberta. This photo of Ernest was taken by Gladys, and 2 local plays have actually been written and performed based on Gladys and Ernest's affair. An Unmarried Wife, created by Karen Simonson and Metro's own David Cheris, and The Importance of Being Gladys by Sandra Nichols and Karen Wall. Gladys and Ernest developed a school program together called Birth of the West, History Teaching Pictures, and the program was developed under Gladys's photo studio, the Art League. This photograph here is by C.W. Mathers, whose photo collection, along with 7 other photographers, was purchased by Ernest Brown, and he had an interesting habit of scratching out their names and writing copyright Ernest Brown over top after he purchased them. Gladys learned the profession of photography from Ernest, and it's almost impossible to separate their photos since they often work together. However, Gladys's ads are her own photography. In 1920, she established her photography studio, the Art League, and she was one of the first women west of Winnipeg to operate her own studio. Sadly, fire destroyed her studio and contents in 1929, which also included many of Brown's negatives. But she reopened her photography studio over the Empress Theatre on Jasper Avenue, which operated until 1950. As seen in her ads, Gladys specialized in the photography of babies and children. Of the following photos of children, only one is attributed to her, but it's highly likely that all 3 were taken by her. This is the Brander children, and the next 2 are identified as the Reeves children, who were probably her nephews. I think these photos are excellent examples of her compositional skills, as well as her ease of working with children. One of her business cards states, "It is nice to have pictures of the years to come. Photographs of children never grow up." I love her inclusion of details such as the partially eaten apples here. And Gladys often wrote about her love of children, and I suspect she probably would have liked to have had her own, but because of the social norms of the time, I also think that her status as a single woman opened doors to her that she would not have had she been married with children. And this photo, if it were a true pillow fight, the pillows would have been blurry. And I love the composition that she has here, including the shoes under the bed. This photo does have her name in the margin, dated 1920, so we know it's hers. And there are some photos that also were signed by her. This is one. The Applehead dolls are identified as figures by Miss G. Poitras, and you can see in the painted photo backdrop and in the foreground that she, although it was a commissioned photograph, she interpreted the commission with her own artistry. In the letters from her archives collection, she often wrote about clients who visited her studio, and Mr. Longmore was one who she mentioned. This photo is titled the J.C. Longmore Residence, so we can be fairly certain it was taken by her. This lovely house was in the Alberta Avenue area of Edmonton, but as is the case with many Edmonton historic houses, it was demolished. And she was very close with her family. This is a photo she took of her father, William P. Reeves, and it was also signed by her, so we know it was hers. And she and her father both shared a love of gardening and both received awards for gardening. And Gladys was one of the founders of the Edmonton Tree Planting Committee. She would probably have taken this photo of boys about to plant trees. Many of the mature trees that we see in the boulevards in central Edmonton today were planted by her and her tree planting committee from the 1920s to the 1940s. And Gladys was also an avid letter writer to newspapers and city councils to advocate for the beautification of the city. Here she is doing her thing to plant trees and dig them up herself. She was also the first female president of one of my favorite names of society, the Edmonton Horticultural and Vacant Lot Gardening Association. I'm a visual artist, and I was a longtime photo archivist at the Provincial Archives of Alberta, and I draw my inspiration from archival records. And Gladys's photos and writings at the archives were an abundant source of inspiration for my most recent exhibit. I use an image transfer method to include archival photos in my paintings, and the quote by Gladys In this particular painting you see here, which I titled Back to the Garden, Back to the Garden might well be a motto put into action by employed and unemployed alike. It costs little for seed, and the energy and time will be amply repaid by the fresh vegetables with which to help out our larder, and a few 10-cent packets of flower seeds will brighten many a lot and cheer us up if we feel depressed. And I use archival photos, and I put them into my laptop computer and then print out onto a wax or silicone-based paper and then transfer them directly onto beeswax. And I like the muted look of the images that I get in this image transfer method. This is a photo of Gladys that I used in that last painting. And she was also involved and active in other volunteer work. She was a charter member and president of the Seroptimist Club of Edmonton, and she worked with Ernest Brown to create the Pioneer Days Museum in Edmonton. I titled this painting Gladys as River Valley Warrior, and her quote here is, "Those of us who have lived among Edmonton's ravines and riverbanks, enough to know and love them, have drunk in the beauty of the bursting leaf buds in spring, the restful swath of green in the summer, the riot of color during our autumn days, and the magic of Jack Frost's artistry on a hoar-frosty morning in winter." Gladys was a constant advocate for preserving Edmonton's river valley and keeping development out of natural spaces. This is the photo that I used in the last painting, likely taken by Ernest Brown, and it's titled Gladys Reeves as Britannia. Gladys died in Edmonton in 1974 at the age of 83, but her legacy remains. Thank you.